I'm glad to welcome everyone to the first scientific and methodological forum, Psychological Trauma and War. My name is Andrei Salonsky and I'm speaking as a manager of the crisis psychological hotline Stop Panic, which was started on the first day of the full-scale invasion. Our hotline is organized by the Institute of Psychiatry of Kyiv National University, which is headed by Dr. Irina Pinchuk, and Golda Meir Institute, headed by Albert Laser Feldman. I think this talk is important not only to tell you about our experience, but actually to welcome you to reflect on the situation we were facing in Ukraine and how to be prepared from the perspective of mental health service providers. Originally, our hotline started in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating effects on mental health. We took a pause since then, but stayed in touch with our colleagues. As you may hear, the Ukrainian defense is widely supported by its volunteers, and our hotline is yet another evidence of the robust character of the Ukrainians. Together, we united superb experts in the fields of psychology, psychiatry, and psychotherapy who were willing to help with no paycheck in mind. In the beginning, the volunteer staff consisted of more than 20 specialists, reaching 30 a month after, 13 of whom were the most actively involved in the work of the line. As a volunteer service, we were not prepared for the number of calls we were getting during the first weeks of the full-scale invasion. Since no one knew this was coming, so didn't we. Our team didn't have access to the hotline format from unified number such as 0800, so the only solution is to spread our personal mobile numbers into the web for people to reach us. Mainly, we were informing people through social media platforms, and then it was spreading by the chain reaction of people we deliver help to. The upside of this scheme was the fact that actually people could choose whom to call, whether it will be a man or a woman, a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Still, the downside was the unevenly spread calls, where some specialists whose phones appeared to be transferred more got 90 calls, while others, let's say, got 10. It was also hard to build an ad campaign, keeping 20 plus numbers in mind and considering the availability of each specialist, but we didn't have the privilege to choose from, and we were doing our best. Though our hotline was not the only one in Ukraine, the amount of help people demanded at that moment was immeasurable. So this is one thing to think of. The flow of calls was insane. During the first weeks, some volunteers reported up to 50 calls per day, and I myself was having up to 30, considering that the mean time on the call was from 10 to 20 minutes. We were working on the courage and most of the time, and volunteers were answering even late night calls. Calls were received mainly from the active combat zones by the civilian population. Both adults and youth applied for help, as well as adults with the request to help their children, because among the volunteers there were experts who specialized in working with children. After some months since the beginning of the full-scale war, the number of calls rapidly decreased, which can be attributed to adaptation to life in the war conditions. The most frequent requests were related to anxiety, in particular panic attacks, increased anxiety, and somatic symptoms, upon what is trembling of the lips, heaviness when breathing, uneven breathing, increased heart rate. The volunteers also received a lot of social requests. Where possible, psychologists helped and found the information people needed, like where is the nearest pharmacies and where is the bomb shelters that is open nearby. And in other cases, volunteers redirected them to third-party groups. I see it as we were serving as an extra containment of a cognitive power for people, as a mental power bank. Parents who asked for help for their children said that they didn't know how to calm their children down and explain what was happening around them, and asked psychologists to talk to their children. A large number of requests, more than 25%, related to specific psychiatric requests, such as advice on medications for falling asleep, the dosage of sedatives to calm themselves down, or adjusting the course of taking antidepressant drugs that stopped helping after the full-scale war began. The dynamic of requests changed. The goal of the first week of the war was to hold yourself tight and understand what the most reasonable decision can be made to save his or her life and the life of people he or her care about the most. A significant part of requests among adults concerned the issue of evacuation, since was facilitated by a situation of uncertainty, since the purpose of the enemy was not clear, the possible duration of hostilities and the areas in which they could take place were unpredictable. Within this framework of such requests, psychologists served as an additional cognitive resource for clients, helping them weigh their choices, listen and reflect on the decision-making process through retelling, which allowed clients to look at the situation from a different angle and make important decisions more consciously. The next conditional stage came a week later. Those people who stayed at their place of residence had panic attacks during the red aid alerts and shelling, worried about their lives. For those who moved, the main goal was to adapt to new conditions and find a place for themselves. The factors of conflict situation were a large number of people living together due to mass evacuations, which is an alarming atmosphere that created a reasons for conflict situations. Other requests, on the contrary, concerned the feelings of loneliness from those people whose relatives left the city. Psychological assistance interventions focused on the cognitive level, with the support of the health part of the personality, according to Self-Organic approach. Where necessary, psychoeducation was performed to reduce anxiety by explaining the body's physiological response to stress. Also, most of the volunteers were familiar with the basic PH psychological assistance model. This model identifies 6 main coping styles, like phase, emotional response, society, imagination, cognition, and body interaction. The main strategy is to find and appeal to one or more coping strategies that are most inherent in a particular person and strengthen them. As it said in the Bible, Medici curate ipsum, which means doctor, heal thyself. We provided weekly intervention meetings among the volunteers to prevent the possible burnout and development of secondary trauma. During the work on the hotline, most of our colleagues undergo specific trainings aimed at war-related trauma and crisis counseling, most of which were organized by our colleagues from the Israel Trauma Coalition. More than half a year passed since an invasion began, and we used this time to create even better service. Nowadays, we have more than 50 volunteers with a comfortable schedule that enables us to work 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. With the help of our colleagues, we have unified number for free calls inside Ukraine to bring citizens qualitative, anonymous, and professional help. We minimize the effort for the volunteers, so they only need any device with an internet connection to operate the hotline. For the volunteers outside of Ukraine, we created our VPN service to operate the hotline, so they knew they are still a precious part of us no matter where they are. With that said, I hope you can acknowledge how is it important to rapidly establish such a service for crisis help during massive catastrophic events. Thank you for being here and visiting this forum. Glory to Ukraine.